Hello and welcome to our virtual Hangout session where we'll be discussing the process of producing new writing from start to finish. We've got quite a few questions, so before we start, I'd just like to introduce with a quote that we found from Simon Stevens. So theatre practice is not simply about staging the imagination of a playwright, but a multi-authored process of collaboration, conflict, intervention and exploration. So that's why we'll be talking about this today. So we've got quite a few questions. So should we just start with some introductions? Firstly, hello, I'm James. I'll be hosting the soiree, if you like. I'm an actor and writer for both Hung and Switch MCR. Secondly, we have Ellie. Say hello, Ellie.
Hi.
She's a writer here at Hung as well. Then we've got Joe, who is a writer / producer for us. Give us a wave.
No.
Then we've got Lewis as well, who's also a writer. And then we also have two special guests with us here today. So we've got, firstly, we have Lottie, who is involved in our showcase Bypass, which was done, when was that done? August?
July 19.
Always there to back me up, thank you. So you're an actor, aren't you, Lottie?
Yeah, I'm an actor. I trained in the Northwest and then just stayed. So yeah, I was involved in the Manchester Fringe Festival with Hung last July. Yeah.
So nice one, yeah. So, and then lastly, but by no means, we have Faith, who is a director and has worked with us on more or less pretty much everything that we've done. Is that right?
Part of the furniture.
Well, a huge thank you to both of you for joining us for this today. So Hung started around 2 years ago as we asked ourselves what we wanted to see more of in theatre today, new writing, basically. So we've put that at pretty much the heart of everything that we've done and always will. If you want to find out more about us or our previous productions or who we are, head to our website, which is hungtheatre.com. That link will be, where will the link be? Somewhere, probably. Oh, probably somewhere.
Not difficult to remember.
Okay, right then. Well, let's move on to the questions / discussions then, shall we? So, kicking things off, I'd like to start with Ellie. So, I think being a writer might be one of the few jobs that when the job's actually done, the script being finished, the job still isn't actually done yet. So that's just your first draft. So what does the redrafting process look like for you now? Has it changed at all in your years of writing? And more importantly, when is the script actually ready for production?
So I've really loved that question, and I think there's two parts to it. So in terms of redrafting, I write my first draft sitting down, and then all the drafts after that, I'm either standing up and walking around or kneeling down, because I honestly see redrafting as the craft of playwriting, and I need to be on my feet for it. It's quite weird, but I envision draft one when it's being completed as a body on an operating table. So it's in a recognisable shape. You can tell it's a human, you can tell it's a play. There's all these veins with like different ideas and arts all connecting together, but there's the stuff maybe that needs fixing, removing and tightening up. So what I would say is, just like if you're a surgeon, you wouldn't expect to go into an operating table and just start ripping the person open and trying to work out for yourself what's wrong. It is so important to have trusted people in your circle who can say that for you. Because for me, when I first started redrafting, I spent so much time messing about with dialogue, thinking I was redrafting, but really I was just, changing some of the dialogue around and obsessing over commas and small sections, when really that's the equivalent of looking at someone's fingertips when their lungs are in the complete wrong place in the body. And I think sometimes you just need someone to point that out for you, and it might, at first it's a bit daunting, and no one no one wants to have to sit down for draft 2 and change like the chronology of the play or the form of their play in a major way. But ultimately, it's about being receptive to other people's ideas, especially when it's people you've sought advice from, and really taking that in and changing it really just to tell the story you want to tell. Because I think that's what's made us all want to write in the first place, is wanting to say the things we want to say. So the actual fine details of it are very dispensable. And yeah, so then part 2 of the question, when's it ready for production? So I try not to focus on production and in sense of the actual performed play, and my focus is on having something that's ready for the director and the actors to really get involved in. And I honestly think so much of theatre is that process in itself, of the creatives working together, and the actual performance is a bit of a byproduct a lot of the time. But the 3 main things I would say are, when I think my draft is ready to go on to that next stage, is point number 1, can this only be a stage play? Like, am I using form and exploiting it as much as I can? Because for me, theatre's really a medium for my activism, a lot of the time, a feminist activism, and it only makes sense that I've really thought about it being on stage and that being as useful a medium for me as possible, and exploiting that as much as I can. Number 2 is, I want to make sure that if my script was read by and seen by people who have been affected by, you know, some of the issues raised in the play, say when I was writing Rotting, which had a lot to do with rape culture and really talked about that, I want to make sure that it's not triggering and it's not exploitative, and it's the writing's good enough in itself that I can tell a story without having to rely on people's like trauma responses or body shock to make the play interesting or get my point across effectively. And then third of all, I just think all plays need to be playful, they need to be fun. We're getting people to sit in a dark room by themselves, and sorry, but as soon as you need the toilet and the play is not interesting, that's all you're going to think about. You want people to be able to go into the dark room and, you know, not let them down, not make them forget they need the loo, forget the chair's uncomfy, and really just sit there and be involved in it. And I think you can do all the messing about with language that you want, but that's what theatre needs to be. It needs to be fun. So yeah. What does everyone else think?
I agree. The thing that I picked up on that you said for me is that when you want to bring a director and actor in, I think that's really sort of an important stage, because there's this idea that a play's never finished, which is fair enough. You know, I think as writers, and even, you know, there's always more that you can do to it, but at some point you have to go, yeah, no, here you go, and, you know, bring a director into the fold. And I think with Sirens, when writing that, it was a case of, I think it is 3 drafts before bringing Zoe Barnes, the director, in. Was then able to do a workshop with some actors, write another draft. We were then able to cast it, do a read through, and then from that read through, because of the way it fell, I was able to do another draft after the read through. And I think that sort of goes back to the sort of the Simon Stevens quote at the start, is that, you know, it's a constantly evolving and interrogating process. And I think until you start bringing other people into the world, whether it's just other writers to feed back on your work, or bringing a director in, or bringing actors in, is that's when it really starts to come alive.
Yeah, I think that leads us really nicely into the next question, actually. So now you've actually got the script, it's a physical thing, it's in the world, it's ready to go as a production. Faith, you've directed New Writing, obviously, but you've also judged it, haven't you, as well?
Yeah.
So how was Bruntwood? How was judging for that? And what excites you or connects you with a new script? Is there anything that's a big no-no for you in a script?
Yeah, Bruntwood was really great. Yeah, I learned a lot being on the judging panel for Bruntwood last year. I think that like the biggest thing that I took out of that was like refining like my ability to read a script as a script as opposed to reading it as a play. And what I mean is like when you see a play, there's so many different influences that have sort of shaped that play. Like my influence as a director and the actors and designers, like there's so many influences that shape a play. But when you're given a script, you're given what the writer has written themselves, so you're essentially just like one-on-one with a writer, and I think that's like a really special moment. So yeah, I really appreciated the opportunity to kind of be able to read a script as a script, like just as me and the writer. Yeah, that was really lovely. And it's really helped me as a director actually to kind of do that initial work of drawing out like what is it about this script that's like so fantastic and like I really want to dig into and like with my actors to dig into together. So like things that excite me about scripts, one of the things that I find really exciting is when you're reading a script and you are like, what, this is going to be like live on stage. It's like something is said in a script or something happens in the world of the script and you're like, really? Like, live on a stage? And it's that for me is like, rather than a turn off, that's like, oh my God, I can't wait to like work on this. How are we going to do it? What's going to happen? How would other people do it? That's something else that I think would connect me to a script is, can this script be done like 100 different ways? Like what would I see in this script and what would someone else see in this script? And yeah, that I think that is really nice with new writing, that it's always quite open. Well, it can like it usually can be quite open because of like just how many different worldviews there are nowadays. I also like something in a script that I really like that I think would turn a lot of people off is a really obvious rejection of structure, and like kind of that. I think that was actually something that I really looked for whilst judging Bruntwood, was a kind of like owning of a script by a writer, and it really kind of not rejecting outright as if saying like the kind of more traditional way of writing a script is not fun or interesting or anything, but somebody that would come and like flip it on its head or create like a very obvious structure that was theirs. And yeah, I just find that exciting. Yeah.
I was going to ask you, sorry James, I was going to ask you, Faith, but you basically just answered it, about like how it looks on the page, because you work with it from the page only. I was going to ask you, do writers need to like try harder to impress you in that sense? Like, for instance, constellations, like the format of the words changes the universe, and that's like a rule that Nick Payne gives. Or even Ellie's script, how all the stage directions have like a personality of their own,
Yeah.
character in themselves. Does that really feed into how you engage with the script from?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's like, I think actually it's something that some people would really hate. But like, so the play that won the Bruntwood in 2019 is set out in 3 columns. And I feel like it takes, looking at that, for me, that's really exciting because it's very open. But I think for some people, maybe it wouldn't be so exciting, or it would be, I think it really depends on where a director comes from when they start their work, and how how much they kind of already know they want to do with a piece of text before they've seen it, or like do with a concept before they've seen the text. And yeah, for me, if I open a script and it's very like I've just finished reading Parliament Square by James Fritz, and it's like 3 acts, and each act is completely different in the way it's set out, and that gets me so excited because like 3 chances to just do something new and exciting. So yeah, I think it's definitely personal preference, but I love it.
Great. I mean, that leads us really nicely into the next one as well. So now we've got the writing, we've got the director on board, hopefully. We need someone to actually say the words that we've curated. So, Lottie, my next question's at you. Does your approach to a script differ when working with a piece of new writing versus, say, an existing play like Shakespeare or anything like that? Where do you start with a new character, basically?
Well, what I'd say is, I think everyone who's ever auditioned for drama school has a big Shakespeare monologue probably ingrained in their brain from a young age. So I find it so exciting, and I always feel really privileged to be given a piece of new writing, to be given a character. I think, to touch on what Ellie said, it's a process, and it's a process as much for the director as it is for the actor, for myself. I think a lot of the time I try and learn my lines because I'm quite slow. I think as an actor, you know whether you're slow or you're fast at learning lines, whether you can do it overnight or whether it's going to take you a while. And for me, I always think it's going to take me a while, and it does. But with new writing, I found I can't do that, to do with maybe the rhythm of the performance, the comedic timing. It was absolutely impossible to do it with either of them from last year's Fringe Festival, because, you know, both pieces were so intimate, especially Neighbourhood Watch. And I mean, it took me a few weeks into rehearsal to click my understanding of Sorry and Amends, Take the Bus. I can honestly say for about the first week, I wasn't too sure of what was happening. I think at one point I said to Faith, so am I here? Or is she talking to someone invisible? I think I was so confused. I think because I was taking it a different way probably to everybody else in the room. I think that's why it's such a team effort to kind of discuss and work on it and workshop different scenes. Yeah, so I think it's a process, and I think as an actor, me personally, I can never preempt what's going to happen. So I think it's always best to just go in with an open mind, you know, read the script as many times as you can before you go into rehearsal room, so you can, you know, give an educated conversation about what the script is about, and the respect to the director and the writer of, you know, you've read this, you're willing to understand, you're willing to work on it, it's the process. So yeah, I'd go in as prepared as possible, but not too prepared that I'm structured and I can't have an open mind. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah,
I guess I want to know sort of the relationship with sort of Faith, how you approach sort of the actors within a new piece of writing. Like, do you sit down with the script and sort of tear it to pieces? How do you
horrible.
interpret it?
No,
Working with Faith is horrible.
Yeah, a bitch. So I think what Lottie just said as well about like that whole when going on a different tangent with a script, and like asking, am I here, or am I talking to someone that's invisible? That for me is like some of my favourite parts of working with actors, because actually, yeah, it sounds really funny, but then my brain is like, oh, maybe you are talking to someone invisible. Where are you? Like, what? And what's even happening in this play? Like, and I think with new writing, it's very much like that. the relationship that I have with actors is very much like, oh my gosh, wow, we've got this thing that like no one's seen yet. Let's crack it open and explore it together. So, I mean, I think as well, a lot of it can depend on time, but one of the first things that I like to do with the actors is sit down together, obviously read the script through, but then just in like one of the very first rehearsals, we'll just like make a character profile type thing, and we'll just go through I'll ask the actors just loads of different questions about their characters, and they choose, and it doesn't matter what they choose to me. I more want them to just like make the decisions, so that then when we are working on the script, I mean, obviously it does matter a bit. If you change the world of the script, it matters. But when we're working on the script, they have something to anchor to, so that like they can make a decision. If Lottie turned around to me and said, I'm talking to this invisible woman because of X, Y, and Z, that my character, and you know, ABC to do with my character, I would absolutely like latch onto that idea and run with it, because it's a informed decision that's come from the world of the play and the characters within it. So yeah,
that's such a thing that you can only get in theatre as well. Like,
yeah,
for instance, like if you work on film or if you do any other type of medium, it's always kind of set in stone as like, this is kind of the guideline we've got to follow. But I think with theatre in particular, and especially new writing, it's like we are building a world together. It's got to all coalesce into one thing, and then we create it together. And I think that's really, really special.
yeah.
Well, that's that question done. Let's slide on to the next one. So what are our thoughts on writers being in the rehearsal room? Do we enjoy it? Do we think it's necessary or overbearing? Joe, do you want to start on this one?
Oh, you're sliding into my DMs.
How much fun have you had?
The rehearsal room. I suppose I've only really had one experience with this, because I've not written very much. Nothing proper anyway. Like Loving It was just a fuck about. That was just a bit of fun. But Loved Up for Bypass, that was like my first actual attempt at something that like had any fucking meaning. So I was working with Cara Novotny, who's a fantastic director. Everyone should work with her. Our first rehearsal, I was in the room for a couple of them with Eleanor and Hugo, who were the cast members, and I felt a bit weird because I was making loads of notes, because they were obviously, it's the rehearsal room, so that's where you find stuff out. But I was there just in the corner, just like making notes based on what they were doing, wondering like, oh no, they're not doing this right, they're not doing that right. And then I realised that this isn't my job anymore. Like, I feel like there's an initial read through that needs to take place for everyone who's involved in the process to kind of like unpick your brain, unpick the writer's brain to get their insight into character and stuff like that. But I feel like there's also a line that needs to be drawn as to when you kind of give your baby up a little bit. Like, I didn't enjoy being in that rehearsal room because I still felt opinionated about the piece. And maybe that's because we didn't have a proper read through, I think. But, you know, like the other creatives, like actors and directors, they've got their own, insight. Like, they've got jobs to do, which is tell the story that has been presented to them in the writing, but they've also got creative liberties to throw on top of that and to like layer it up with like cool shit.
There's a certain amount of,
you know, you what?
There's a certain amount of like trust there that you give to the director, and
definitely. I think yeah, that like you've got to find the right cast, the right director to work in sync with you to tell the story that you want to tell from the get-go. Like, at the end of the day, it's like, it's my writing, but it's by no means my piece of theatre. I don't know what everyone else thinks about that.
Yeah,
you go, Lewis. It's okay.
I was just going to say I'm the complete opposite. I love being in every rehearsal room, but I'm not a writer. I don't like to sit and make loads of notes. I sort of just sit there in awe. And I do respect the idea that it's sometimes better for me not to be there, but I do love being there. Yeah, Ellie?
I think what Faith was saying then, oh no, sorry, Joe. Joe was saying then about how you think that sometimes it, not having a proper read through can affect your decisions on that, because I've worked with Faith on 2 projects, and both times I've known that we've went through the redrafting process together. I showed her earlier versions, we had talks, Faith gave me really helpful feedback, and we'd already started creating the world before I handed over the final piece. But I have been involved in a couple of projects where it's, you've written the first draft and then 3 weeks later the play's been on stage, and in that case it can be helpful for the writer to be there, or it can, you can work more in the rehearsal room when it is a shorter project, and it might be more useful for the director and also just for the writer to feel kind of that their vision's gonna still be there when there's not that much time. But I would say that if you've got a director that you really trust and who's been there already for a bit of the journey of the writing, that it does feel more uncomfortable being in the room, because you want them to get on with it. It's their world and the play's taking a life of its own, and it's so exciting, and it's so fun being nosy. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I think working with new writing particularly, for me, I feel like the writer is always in the room, regardless of whether or not they're like physically there. The way I work on new writing scripts is very much a constant conversation between me and the actors about like what is the what's the writer saying, what is this bit implying, what is the story that our writer is telling here. So yeah, the like, especially with like, so Rotting is the first one that springs to mind because it's like the most recent, and it was kind of a really enjoyable process for me and Ellie, as well. But we were constantly like, like, what's Ellie saying here, and what does Ellie mean with this? But also, you remember when Ellie said this? Well, now, blah blah blah, and we were constantly like either making notes to ask her or just like, talking about what she had done within the script. And that was really kind of our in with Rotting. And obviously, like, for me, the door is always open for the writer to be in any of the rehearsals, absolutely. But I do appreciate it when me and the actors get that time to just mess about, because a lot of my rehearsals are just messing about, like to try things to see if they would look any good or not. So I appreciate that space. And actually, for me, the most exciting and equally like nerve-wracking time is always the first time that the writer watches the show, like watches any part of it, especially like the first full run in front of the writer is like, I don't know, I feel like I'm talking to my first crush or something. I get that's the most like thrilling part for me, showing the writer.
Yeah, I think we all feel the same way when we're at the first one.
Yeah.
Lottie, do you get extra pressure? How do you feel when?
I've only ever had one experience of a writer in the room for a different production, and it was positive. I'm very much like Faith. I'm very conversational. So, for example, I think Faith would like email Jade after every rehearsal and be like, "We have these questions," and we'd send clips to Chloe, and is this I think you've got to understand what the heart of the writer what they want to achieve really from the piece. And I think, like somebody said before, it's our job to portray that, what they want to show with this piece. So I think conversation and trust are big parts of it. But I don't mind it. Like you said, I'm there to do a job. There is creative license, but you are wanting to please the writer and portray what they want. So yeah, lots of conversation and trust, I'd say, is a key for it.
Great. Okay. Next question, Lewis. This one's aimed at you. I know lots of discussions before, probably over a pint. How important is it for you that a script is followed to the word? Should it be word perfect? Should stage directions be followed? Like how clinical do you want it to be?
I like to think I'm better with this than I come across, but I'm also aware that people might think that I am worse than I come across with this, in the fact that I think it goes back to the writer in the room. I think if there's something that isn't working, then it needs to be changed, and that is something that can happen in the reading process, like Joe said before, in terms of making sure that there's a good read through. It could be in the room. One example, when we're working on Sirens, is I think there was a line about the dad making ham, egg and chips for tea every night, and then it just so happened that throughout the rehearsal process that meal changed because everybody else has got a different version of ham, egg and chips for tea every night than I have. So yeah, in terms of the dialogue, I mean, with Shakespeare, you're sort of expected to get all the words right, and I think with new writing that's the same. But I'm not a stickler for it, because these aren't plays that have been around, and Shakespeare had an incredible eye, so some things just don't work and do need changing. I found for me it's always the smallest words that I need to be spot on. Like the difference between an I and a we can like completely change the meaning of a sentence, but it's also the things that can be thrown away the easiest. It's easy enough to just say, oh, I did that, or rather than we did that. So yeah, I think it's a collaborative process, and I think that's the whole thing we're learning throughout this, is that you bring those round. In terms of stage directions, I think they're open to interpretation, really. The famous one is Rory Malarkey's Cannibals, where he eats his hand, eats his arm, and then he disappears forever. You can't follow that one literally, can you? There's a lot of stage directions like that can't be followed specifically. And I think that, as Joe mentioned earlier about Ellie's scripts, where the stage directions take on a world of their own, is in that sense, there is a potential metaphor, or there's a potential subtext within the stage directions, and what is actually more interesting is seeing that subtext of the stage direction put out there. In Death Sentence for Bypass, I wrote a line that was basically silence, like a really, really long, uncomfortable silence. And Tom put big, loud, blaring music and 3 boxes across and smashed it all up, which is the complete opposite to what the line was, to what the stage direction was. But it took on what the play was, and actually what was happening in that silence, what was going on in the characters' heads, was what was portrayed on stage, which I really liked, because Tom had gone into the characters' heads and done that, rather than doing the silence that had written in the script. But yeah, I think I'm interested to know, Faith, as a director, where your opinion on stage directions are. Is less more, is more less?
I think in terms of the words written and dialogue, I think it's actually really, really important to honour exactly what's written, because it's like Ellie was saying before about obsessing over one comma. There's a reason why these words have been chosen, and I think it's really important for actors and directors to honour that. And that's actually something that I've had to build my confidence when working with actors, is to like actually like that, can you get that line like bang on? And it's something that like I don't do from the get-go, because I really appreciate how difficult it is for actors to learn lines, but it's something that I really focus on in the last week, like making sure these are like word perfect. But in terms of stage directions, like very much like you, Lewis, like that's a space where I can play, I think. And so like a stage direction that is like quite vanilla and like just, you know, they move here or whatever, I'll tend to like I'll read it and like understand it, but I will not really give it much thought. Whereas like an Ellie Cartmill stage direction, like the roof caves in, and like these stage directions that kind of, I think I'm using you, Ellie, because you're a prime example of this. Like, I feel like your stage directions tell us the unspoken within the world of the script, and that for me is really exciting. And yeah, like kind of the end of Rotting, where the majority of it, there was a lot of big stage directions that were like literally the roof caves in and the girls are buried, that kind of thing. That was really exciting for me, and for the actors as well. Actually, we spent a lot of time with Joe creating a whole soundscape that like drove us mental, but really in the end we all felt like it really told like Ellie's story. And yeah, after watching Odds, Ellie's show in Bypass, the first thing I wanted to do was read the script and read the stage directions, and like talk to Tom about like why he'd chosen to do this, that and the other with it. And yeah, I was, as soon as it finished, I was like, I really want to read that script. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's move on to the next one. So this one's aimed at Joe. So we've touched on the fact, you know, earlier on that you've done sort of 2 roles within Hung throughout our time, both as a writer and as a producer as well. So short form is getting quite popular for new writing at the minute. You know, lots of companies are doing it, us included, with Snowflakes, which is our first showcase, and Bypass, which is our second. Can you discuss the differences in producing short form and long form, and where the difficulties might lie in each?
Yeah. Okay. I'll go from
being Joe's emotional support blanket throughout both.
I just need someone to hand me a tea every other minute for all of them. No, okay, I'll short form is really good for new voices and startup theatre companies, I think, because it lets you stick your mark on the industry as a new company. I think like you can be really playful with like the theme and stuff like that, because most of these are done with themes, aren't they? And you can, as well, for a new writer, it's a nice easy way in for someone who hasn't got a lot of experience with writing, because you're given a provocation, you're given a short space of time, so it's not too overwhelming. So that's really good. And it's also very easy to sell tickets. The short form, like if you do a showcase, like what Snowflakes was like 40 creatives. If all of those brought 3 people, you'd have had to sell out 3 nights at the King's Arms, which we did. Oh. Flexing. So from a producer point of view, it's very economical to do short form because the rewards will be there in money. But there's a lot of shortfalls, I think. It's costly, even though it makes money. It's costly, especially when you're trying to be equitable towards paying people. Like you can't pay 40 people industry standard rates, you're not going to get project grants from Arts Council for that ever, unless it's going to have a massive impact on culture or the audiences that you're bringing in, which it's likely not going to. It's also quite time consuming. I think what we did for Bypass and Snowflakes was really great. We put a lot of time and effort into making them like the best that they could be in terms of like the production of it and everything, I think. But I think that's time and effort that could be better spent elsewhere going forward. Like the rewards for the writer in those scenarios are slim because it's only a short piece, and your name kind of gets lost amongst the noise of names and faces all over the place with every creative that's involved, because there are loads. And then it also limits the writer in terms of the time that you get, the dedication that other people can give you. Like me, having to produce 8 pieces for Bypass, I could only give each script a certain amount of dedication because I had so much to like organize. But then also, if you're a writer with ambitions, like having a given circumstance, a given provocation can be really difficult. It can be quite entrapping, I think, if you want to just kind of go wild with it. Whereas long form, you can do anything you want. It's the time to be yourself as a creative, as a director, as an actor, as a writer. You can kind of go all out with it. It gives you like the breathing room to play and experiment. It's much more rewarding in terms of the noticeability because every actor, director, writer is given that platform because there's less people involved. So you really can dive into who those people are and how they've inputted on that project. And it's also easier to get funding for that. So you can actually pay people with a smaller team, which we did for the double bill, which was amazing to do. And then, the writing is just at the heart of it with shorter pieces. Like the double bill, in comparison to the 2 showcases we've done, it really felt like the stories that we were trying to tell were the main thing we were trying to get across, as opposed to Bypass and Snowflakes, which were very much more about making our mark on the industry with some interesting provocations of kind of scratchy pieces. I don't know what everyone else thinks about that in terms of their experience working on these productions.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear what you think, Lottie. What is it easier to be in sort of a smaller piece because you've got less lines to learn, or is it more fun to be in a longer piece because you've got that time to breathe and really develop a character? Or
with Hung at the Fringe, I had a really positive experience. I think sometimes when you go in knowing that there's going to be so many pieces, so many actors, you kind of think, oh God, and then with the rehearsal you give so much of your time, and obviously we all have jobs, we all have to get paid and things like that. When you said about not being able to pay, it is, you think, oh God, I want to give this my whole, but I've only got this much time, I can only afford to do this much. But honestly, I can just say, not just because you're here, that it was a really positive experience. And I think, like you said, making your mark, I honestly think Bypass did that. And for example, I as an actor would jump at the chance again, and I think that's something really positive to take from it. I just really loved, I think whoever did it needs a shout out. We all got the night before where we were at like every given minute throughout the whole.
Yeah.
So it was, Lottie, you will be sat on this sofa while this is happening, and you will be escorted. And I think when I got the email, I was like, oh wow. And then I thought, no, this is brilliant.
Oh,
I know exactly where I need to be. I would have done it myself, I'm an adult, but I just thought that's the kind of organisation like I want. This is the kind of, but I don't know how you juggle all those actors. Luckily, we have an absolute team of delightful people, but all it takes is one annoying person, isn't it? And luckily, we really didn't have that. It was such an amazing team. I'm still friends with, I'm going to say, all of the actors. I still in contact with all of them, and I think that's really positive. Whereas that's the kind of organisation you need when you've got a load of dickheads, I guess is the word. But yeah, it was really positive.
They call them actors. Sorry.
Yeah, I hope that answered it. I think my experience with bypass and doing obviously the short runs was really, really positive. Obviously, I would love to do something longer and spend more time with the team because we had such an amazing team. But yeah, I'm very positive.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, I think we're gonna have to wrap up now, aren't we? I think that about reaches the time that we've got. Hopefully, that's given you a bit of an insight as to who we are as a company and maybe inspires you to do something similar, because we started from pretty much nothing and we're just a group of mates and decided to put together a company. Now we've got 3 shows under our belt and a full season planned post lockdown. So obviously life's a little bit tough right now, but my gosh, we're gonna have lots to do once this is all done. I think we can all agree. Once again, a huge thank you to Faith and to Lottie for joining us for this. It's been lovely to have you here. A big thank you to Two in a Bed's theatre company as well for inviting us to this theatre in isolation event. And lastly, a thank you to yourselves as well for watching. We hope to see you at our next show, which, are we allowed to say anything about that yet? Oh, no then.
Oh my God, I've not heard anything.
All right, then we'll keep your eyes peeled on our socials then. We're at Hung Theatre, Twitter and Instagram as well. And again, like I mentioned before, head over to our website, which is hungtheatre.com, to sign up to our mailing list as well, which will be starting shortly, I believe. Yes, right then, get in there. Well, cheers for that, guys. I'll catch you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.